Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Blade Runner 2049. First off, this is going to start off, I guess, spoiler-free, and then there'll be a spoiler section. So if you are watching a review of a movie you don't want spoiled, which is a bit of a contradictory idea in itself, but if you are doing that, then you can watch the beginning and there will be like, there's spoilers from here type of thing. And I will say, and as much as I just made fun of you for watching a review of a movie that you don't want spoiled, I actually found it really refreshing when this film started and I realized there were things that had not been spoiled for me or told to me through trailers or pre-production or revealed on movie sites. It really made this film feel fresh in a way that I rarely get to go into new movies with. Grabbed my attention a little more than I thought it would initially because of that, because it would go in ways that I wasn't expecting because I didn't know to expect them. And I thought that was actually really good. And I think it actually works for the film. Other films, that way works for them too. Well, that's fine. I don't think there is one way or one distinct way to watch every movie, basically. Blade Runner 2049 is very much playing on Denis Villeneuve's clear love of the original Blade Runner movie, but it's also being a sequel to the Blade Runner film at the same time, using theories that were brought up in the original and playing within them actually very well, and using that world in a place of love and fandom almost, but doing it in more of a natural storytelling way that both works for it, but you can tell like this wants to be a natural sequel to it and a continuation in that world, but also very much wants to call back from it at certain points as well, which works a lot more naturally than probably a lot of reboots that want to exist within that story do. This is very much a follow-up as well as trying to do a different story, but existing kind of within that framework. In fact, I think this film very much understands that you have seen the original Blade Runner and are familiar with it, and are probably familiar and have seen multiple cuts of it. I wouldn't say see this film before you've seen the original Blade Runner. That's weird to me. Why would you do that? In Blade Runner 2049, it plays off of the idea that you very much have seen it and are familiar with what's going on, and it does that in kind of a more natural way. It's probably going to work well watching this film back to back with the original Blade Runner. It very much plays like a big budget blockbuster kind of art movie, the same way the original Blade Runner very much did, which is actually really refreshing and nice. That was probably my biggest sort of concern, is that, you know, you have these two guys with guns on the poster and shit, and you imagine that it's probably going to be a big blockbuster type of thing because you have Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling in a big budget movie together, and that would be a natural thing, frankly. But it doesn't do that. In fact, Denis Villeneuve is probably a better choice for this because he plays more in the ideas that people love of Blade Runner and natural ideas than kind of going on a weird Ridley Scott, you know, sci-fi idea rant that he did with those Alien prequels that I'm guessing most of you didn't like all that much. He is able to play it more in a way that he very much kind of isn't sick of this world and wants to find his own avenue to play in it. He loves this world and wants to find a different way to do it and kind of replicate a way to do it in his own way, almost make his own Deckard with its own story, but also playing within the framework that we're used to in the original. Now, this film is shot by Roger Deakins, and beautifully so, almost so beautifully so, it reminds me of the beautiful cinematography of the original, so naturally you can almost take it for granted in a way, but Roger Deakins' work kind of loves the fact that you will take it for granted, but also knows it's so beautiful you can't take it for granted at the same time. I would say, I don't know if this is maybe his most beautifully shot film, and I'm going to go on some rant about the Oscars or something, but Roger Deakins has been one of the greatest cinematographers of all time for a long time now. So acting like he's great or deserves some sort of recognition is a notion that's been passed on in my mind for a long time now. Roger Deakins is one of the great cinematographers of all time, and this film just kind of continues that. It doesn't cement it. It's been cemented every time almost this guy makes a movie, and he continues to do it. So he obviously really loved making this film. Denis Villeneuve knows how to use a cinematographer and knows how to use a great cinematographer. Looking at how he used, I believe it was Bradford Young on Arrival, he really knows how to, you know, epically use a cinematographer, almost in the way Spielberg uses a cinematographer. It's different when a director uses a cinematographer, almost like they direct an actor and are able to use, through their directorial vision, use that cinematographer in a way that brings out their film and makes it just look eye-poppingly amazing, and I think Denis Villeneuve very much knows how to do that. I've seen other directors work with Deakins and never as well as Denis Villeneuve does, and it seems like every movie he almost increases. I kind of still think Sicario is kind of their bigger, huge achievement, although I love like the stuff in Vegas, which is amazingly beautiful. Like, I like when they let Roger Deakins just go, and similar to what you saw him do in Skyfall, he very much likes doing artistic, kind of weirder Coen Brothers things. He's normally the Coen Brothers cinematographer, but it's also wonderful to see him do these big budget, like blockbustery type things, and he very much like plays in that way and gives such a nuanced cinematic eye. He kind of puts his cinematography on a plane unto itself that no other DP could even reach, particularly in those kind of films. It's kind of unbelievable how he does these sort of things. And when people say, you know, he inspires cinematographers and things like that, I'm always like, really? Because he's on such an advanced level. I don't know if anyone's really at that peak that he's working at. He seems to understand how to use different colors and different settings for different scenes, how to play on that, and how to use that to make just beautiful, striking images. I mean, literally, I think there's very few frames in this film that will not end up being someone's desktop background at some point, just because they're just so eye-catchingly beautiful. Like, you could watch this film with the sound off and it would be amazing, but that would be like, you know, missing a lot of the point of the movie and all the other great, you know, craftsman works that's going on in this film. This is an amazingly gorgeous looking movie. Particularly, I love when Deakins works with unusual light sources. He's so fucking good at that. Clearly, the relationship of Denis Villeneuve with Deakins from Prisoners to Sicario to this has kind of naturally evolved and gotten better and better in terms of cinematography, and particularly with that idea of using unconventional light sources is something that Roger Deakins is just absolutely amazing at in this, particularly how he uses light. I think the lighting in this film is just absolutely strikingly beautiful, and how Deakins uses that speaks to how masterful his cinematic eye really is. I want to talk more about this film, but I think to really get into my full feelings about it, I really need to get into spoiler territory. But basically, I do like this film. I don't think I'm as fanatical of a Blade Runner fan even before this movie as a lot of people are. I still think it is a good film. I don't think it is like better than the original, really. That's sort of ridiculous to say that on a first viewing, but I think it is still a very strong film. It very much is a good sequel to it, and I think it very much plays into it and is a natural place to take this story and this world and these characters. And I want to go into more of these ideas, so I'm just going to, if you haven't seen this film, this is the point to pause it or come back to this after you have seen it, because now we are going to move on to spoilers. If you do not want Blade Runner 2049 ruined for you, then, you know, don't watch this part, because you've been warned. So one of the bigger things with Blade Runner is the idea of consciousness, and the idea of the original one of kind of Deckard being involved in this investigation of whether these replicants or robots basically have a certain consciousness, and the idea of identity and what having that consciousness means, and even the idea of God through his investigation. In this film you have K, or whatever the long numbers that Ryan Gosling's character has, and he is of course a replicant himself. This film, by the way, I think answers the replicant thing, and it's sort of already been answered about Harrison Ford, and this kind of plays off of Ridley Scott's cut of Blade Runner, but it still kind of keeps it a little vague. That I saw people debating it in the lobby, and I've seen reviews where people aren't sure, but to be honest, I am sure that Deckard is a replicant, but whatever. But in this, Ryan Gosling, who is a replicant, is sent to investigate the idea that a replicant 30 years ago, or a while ago or something, two replicants procreated actually and made a replicant child, and the idea of both that in terms of replicant production and the idea that now that replicants can procreate, does that make them more human, or does that validate them more as just disposable labor? That idea is very interesting. It's apparently has been done in science fiction before, and I guess a lot of people have said don't just disregard that because it's been done before. It's more about how they executed it and less about the idea. Certainly I like this film at the beginning, and I think one of the things that really works for it is the idea I knew nothing going in. So if you watch this part, like, seriously, what's wrong with you? The idea that, you know, Ryan Gosling's character is a replicant, the idea that his girlfriend is this weird hologram thing. I like the beginning where he's on his own investigation, and then it's like a sequel in the world of Blade Runner, and then it eventually is like, oh, so you are a Blade Runner sequel now, more in like a direct way than it was playing before. And I think I liked it before, and it felt like I get less and less invested in this film as it went on, and kind of in a natural way, to be honest, because not only is it kind of shifting and becoming this direct Blade Runner sequel while looking amazing, and actually, you know, by the way, even though I wasn't crazy about this film, I still thought it was very good. I think the difference between what the original Blade Runner did and what this did is, for a while, for Deckard, it's very much he's involved in that investigation. The themes of that are speaking to him, and we're going through it, and it's all through his investigation. And that, by the way, is normal how film noir does it. You know, the whole theory and ideas that they might be talking about through that investigation are usually done like through the detective as he or she is experiencing those things. And in Blade Runner 2049, we find out halfway through that a lot of those memories are implanted, and that he's not like this replicant kid and all that stuff. And you're just like, oh, so what's Ryan Gosling? He's just gonna finish this, I guess. I think that was like a narrative choice, and I still think it's good at doing that, but it kind of like lets you go in a way that feels weird. Like, okay, so you're following this guy for this whole movie, and then we get to this point and it's like, okay, so all these, like, it's implanted through this lady, and you're like, oh, that's... And I kind of didn't feel as attached to it, and it felt like cold in a way that I thought was honestly more off-putting than anything. I understand the natural idea of that, and like these replicants procreating, and the ideas of slavery and consciousness and identity, and understanding that just because you're using someone as a workforce, they have an identity and a consciousness and a life, and not regarding that is kind of the reason that humanity keeps having issues going on henceforth. And this is just another kind of techno version of that, basically. But in Blade Runner 2049, it kind of messes with that, because it's like, I think Blade Runner is very much in the film noir tradition. It's very much in that. It's a science fiction story. It very much plays more as a science fiction story than a film noir. And I wouldn't even say it's like neo-noir, because a lot of those things just like take tropes of it and exist too much in it. And I think in Blade Runner 2049, they use the neo-noir detective thing. They almost betray it by getting him so uninvolved that it's kind of like they have this like plot baggage of Ryan Gosling's character, which is sort of unfortunate. This almost feels like something like the Coens would do. Like The Big Lebowski is basically a detective story of, you know, a kidnapping, but instead of being about all the more interesting people, you do the bad guy who's like not very interesting, like someone who's like in a normal movie would be like a character who would get 2 lines and say, they thought I was Lebowski, I don't, like, you would just get a few things with them and that's it. And the Coen brothers are really good at doing that. But Denis Villeneuve and this film kind of are like demanding more of a plot structure and the way of using a character that's normal for this kind of a movie, and it doesn't really entirely work, and especially in terms of connection and everything. It's almost like he's kind of a conduit to get to this kind of like Deckard thing and everything with like his kid and all that stuff. I also don't love the idea that like, why does it always have to be that like when you get to like a sequel, you suddenly make these characters like overly more important than they probably ever were in that world. And it could have just been like, in a film noir, it's kind of like downbeat and modest, and I think this film kind of plays that up in ways that I'm not entirely in love with. I still like how Denis Villeneuve managed to execute these, and he does it in a way that like a lot of the worser plot elements I didn't really bother me until I'm leaving and go, wait a sec, what? I like how he still sort of kind of keeps the Deckard thing vague, even though it's not, but he sort of does. And that people were confused, I think, is actually really cool. And he does try to not answer as many questions in the sequel way that were like left unanswered from the original, but he sort of does and doesn't. He does it in a vague way, and it's very smart about it. All the ideas of consciousness, and even the idea of like a replicant falling in love with a hologram, and the ideas of intelligence and consciousness, and the idea of her consciousness, and like even kind of being manipulated by something that's made to be consciousness, and how maybe it's not as conscious as we think it is, and how far technology has gone that it can like replicate consciousness to a point that it's actually not as conscious as maybe we think it is, which brings into question Ryan Gosling's character and really all of the replicants at a certain point, whether consciousness can be kind of actually made as product and maybe not be as conscious and as unique as we all think we really are, and how important consciousness and humanity maybe isn't isn't as unique and beautiful as we all think it is, because this girlfriend who he very much loves, who very much feels like someone who has their own unique personality for certain parts of it and can even self-sacrifice themselves, really is not that unique and isn't really making those decisions through kind of an idea of, you know, free will or something. It's something that's made into their programming, which also brings in a whole fate versus free will argument. So if you're a freshman in college, this should be a really cool movie for you. I like Blade Runner 2049 for the most part. There's a lot of me who wants to see this film again, really, and think about the ideas within it and think about what it's exactly doing and what it's saying with those things. And I think it is a film that probably expects you to watch it again. Unlike the original Blade Runner that was just kind of being its own thing, this very much understands that. And I almost want to say, haha, they're going to make more cuts of it, but I also am like, I think that's probably what's going to happen too. It's like so made to be that, and it kind of is like taking this film that was a unique kind of different kind of movie and trying to kind of package it in a way. If you're very much into intelligent science fiction, or one of those people who never sees movies and then complains about how they're not good anymore, I'm sure you'll totally love this film, and I get to hear you talk about that at parties and be insufferable, so that'll be fun. I do like Blade Runner 2049. I don't think it's as good as the original. I think there's a lot of kind of narrative faults in it that don't really make it be that. If it wasn't directed as well and shot as well as it is, it would probably be a lot more noticeable. Maybe on a second viewing it is a lot more noticeable, or maybe I won't have as big of a problem with it. In terms of its storytelling conventions, I don't know if that worked as well because of the ultimate story it was telling. And I think that's one of the things about Blade Runner, is when you get to the end, you think about the big story that it is telling, it kind of like makes you think about it. And I think the thing with Blade Runner 2049 is when I was thinking about it, it didn't hold up to kind of thought as much as the original did, and I think that kind of falters in the real intelligent science fiction that it's trying to be. But I still think there are a lot of ideas there that makes you think about consciousness and things like that. Basically, I'm sort of more split on it, where I think it sort of lives up to the ideas and the kind of high brow kind of science fiction that the original did, but in other ways I think it falters on that and doesn't succeed as well. I think Denis Villeneuve naturally kind of does a thing where he makes every movie differently, and he very much knows how to kind of change his auteur voice based on each project he's working on, and Blade Runner 2049 naturally worked within that, and he was really the perfect person to ever make this film. And I think he's almost made this film probably better because he was the perfect person to make this film. I don't know if this is really his crowning achievement. I don't think it is, but I still think it is a very uniquely beautiful, amazing kind of big budget, high art, intelligent science fiction film. It might not live up to those things, and yes, it's probably too long, but I still think it decently follows up Blade Runner in a way that you'll leave and be fairly satisfied. But I'm curious how well this film will hold up on repeat viewing. I think most people will leave 20 years later and say, yeah, it was sort of fine, but man, it was a hell of a beautiful looking movie. So if you have seen Blade Runner 2049 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.